So today we're going to talk about Tier 2 Valorant because if you've been living under a rock, Tier 2 Valorant had some problems. And Riot has released this article about what they're going to do for Tier 2 in the upcoming year. It's not a ton of specifics, but it's just kind of a brief outline of some of the things they're going to do. So I'll leave a link to the article if you want to read it all. We're not going to read all of it, of course. They start off with just, what they want Tier 2 to be. And we're just going to go to really what they're changing. So how it's going, yeah, it worked. Whatever, what's working, and they talk about, how some leagues like NA and, France and Japan, like some of the leagues are actually doing pretty good, right? And have good viewership and, look good. But of course, there are other places where that isn't the case, but this is what we really want to talk about. What are the problems, right? These are the problems that we've been running into. First one they talk about is viewership. As I, said, like some leagues are doing perfectly fine. In fact, very well for a tier 2 system. But others, not so much, right? Quite a few of the EMEA leagues and whatnot, and probably some of the Pacific ones as well, aren't doing really well enough to actually be sustainable and, just live. And obviously, you need some amount of viewership, right? Even if that's not the primary goal, which they do mention in this, even though viewership is not how we primarily measure success for tier 2, you still do need a certain amount of viewership for it just to be viable, of course. So that's one problem. The second problem is the calendar. The second challenge we saw this year was the calendar. We ultimately don't believe that challenge teams are getting enough reps, which hinders their ability to develop. And, development of talent is what Riot wants Tier 2. The primary focus of Tier 2 to be is for talent development. And obviously, to get that, you need to play enough games in Tier 2 to make that, a thing. And especially for the teams that don't qualify for Ascension, their season ends in early June, and that means that, for half the year, you aren't doing anything, and that was a big, big problem this year. And then the final one here is a stepping stone, and this is an interesting little comment, and I'm sure some of you probably won't agree with this, certainly certain pros won't agree with this. This leads me to the final but very important point. We don't see challenges as a destination, but as a way station to top-tier professional play. It's a stepping stone, a place for players to hone their skills for the next level, but not a place to stay. This to me reads as, hey, pro players who are complaining about how you're not going to make, a full living in Tier 2, yeah, you're not going to make a full living just staying in Tier 2. That's what this reads to me, where it's like, if you are just trying to get cozy in Tier 2 and just want to stay there your entire career, we're not designing this system to be viable for you to make that your full career, right? It seems like they're basically saying, get ascended, play well enough to play for a top tier team, or, this is a part-time job at that point, right? That seems to be what they're saying here, basically. And yeah, that's what they seem to be thinking. So that is what it is. And yeah, I'm sure some of you won't agree with that necessarily, but that's what Riot seems to think. Anyway, let's go on to the changes that they are actually making here, right? So the first one is the schedule, right? So instead of limiting Challenger Leagues to run from January to June, we'll transition to running them year-round, including the back half of the year when Tier 1 is in the off-season. We hope that it'll give challengers space during those moments and significantly help viewership. This change will require trade-offs, like not broadcasting the entire early phase of competition in every stage, but each league will likely take a different approach. In the same vein, we will be moving Challenger Ascension to September after Champions, so it has its own moment in the spotlight. We believe Ascension is one of the most exciting moments of the year in the VCT, as the culmination of a path to pro journey as an incredibly high stakes. This change will better position it in the calendar and allow it to shine even more. So let's talk about these two paragraphs then, because this is obviously changing to the schedules. And this is overall, I just think, a massive win. I don't really see how you could take this as a massive negative, or a negative really in any sense. This to me seems just like a big win, right? The schedule, as I said, was one of the big problems and was the easiest one to fix, right? Just change the schedule. And they have, which is very good. And yeah, it makes sense to have, Tier 2 maybe start before Tier 1 does, end after Tier 1 does, So at the start of the year, right, there's no other Valorant going on. Hey, tier 2's on, I'll watch tier 2. You start getting invested maybe in some of the stories. Maybe then you don't even watch it fully throughout whilst the rest of tier 1's going on. But you come back like, oh, Ascension's on, there's nothing else on again. And it's like, oh, I remember that team. Yeah, they were doing well at the start of the year. Oh, they're still doing well. They're in Ascension. Let's go. That's my team in this tier 2 scene or whatever, right? And yeah, for those times when tier 1 isn't on, yeah, viewership probably will be higher because it's the only ticket in town. So that's good. I'm sure some people will talk about like, oh, they're not going to broadcast the early phase in every stage. We're talking about like, the qualifiers to get into the leagues, I'm guessing is what they're talking about there, right? Which honestly, I know that some people will be like disappointed at that. I'm assuming that's maybe because there's a broadcasting budget that they might have for each of these regions and whatnot. And maybe if they did it all year round, right, that might just be too much in their broadcasting budget. It might just go over budget or whatever it is. And so they can't do it. Honestly, I don't care that much. I think that's fine. And also, Ascension is moving to September after Champs. So this is good. Right, and so where Ascension was this time, which was just before LCQ, but after the second Masters tournament, I'm assuming that the qualifications, those kind of last qualification games for Ascension, those important games, will go in that gap as well. So we'll get Masters 2, whatever it is, right, big tournament, international for Tier 1. Then we'll get the Tier 2, like qualifying for Ascension. Then we'll get LCQ, Champs, and then we will get Ascension after the fact. And this is good. Again, I think that this all is just a big win. I don't really see how anyone would say it's not. I think this is just good. Right? And more people will get more time to play, which makes sense if your goal is to improve and develop talent. Yeah, this is just a win. The second change, now this is a much more interesting change, I guess. I'm not as hyped for this one, maybe. The second change is related to player mobility. Aiming to see more players moving between the layers of our sport, we've decided to allow teams in international leagues to build an affiliate relationship with Challenger League teams, as well as create a new player loan system. The new structure will enable teams to exchange players more freely, with the goal of seeing the resources from the top level of the pyramid support Tier 2 player development. Now, here's the thing. I think a lot of people, again, would be happy to see, teams more freely be able to make changes and whatnot. That I think people, again, would be for. The way that they're doing this, though, and the, you get the affiliate relationship with Challenger League teams as a player and a player loan system, that's very interesting, right? I come from a background of football or soccer for you Americans, and loaning in football is a completely like integrated, almost essential part of how teams, the big teams will loan out, in some cases, like 30, 40 players in a year, right? Just all of their like young talent players that, can't get into their first team of the big teams, they just all go out on loan, right? And they come back and it's like, who's good? That's what happens in football. And so, it works in football. It could work in Valorant, I suppose. I'm not quite sure the big teams are big enough to maybe fully buy into it, and I think that that's going to be my problem. We're going to have to see the specifics on this. There's a lot of questions that I have about, like, the specifics of this, which we don't have in this document. And also, though, we need to see this play out. Even if we had all the specifics, we need to see this play out, because I'm not sure how many Tier 1 teams will actually do this, right? I'm not actually sure how many will, really fully go for it. Maybe the very biggest orgs, right? Very stable orgs like Fnatic or something. I could see them going for it, right? Who seem to, obviously Mini has a very good eye for talent and probably wants to see if they could do something with this. But for a lot of the orgs, particularly in the current kind of climate of, the esports winter, I'm not sure that they would be doing this that much, right? And seeing themselves in this. So I'll be interested to see how this works. I'll just say, I don't know. For now, I don't know if this is a good change or not, because I think we have to see this system kind of play out before we really know, like, how many teams are actually doing this, right? Is it even worth doing at all for the teams? Don't know. So that's an interesting change. We'll have to see. And then the final change is Premier. Obviously, I'm sure most of you guys know what Premier is at this point. It's the in-game client that you play tournaments on, and these tournaments will eventually qualify teams into Challenger Leagues. So, basically from in-game, it will be connected to Tier 2, basically, is the thing. which we knew about already. Obviously, yeah, this was always going to be the pipeline. That's what, when Premiere was announced, that's what they said they wanted it to be anyway. So yeah, that's this. Now, are these changes enough to make tier 2 like completely viable and everything's going to be fine next year? No, of course not. No. One of the things that I think, obviously they don't really mention how any of this will fix. One of the problems is viewership, right? I don't know how any of these changes will really help viewership in any kind of way, other than maybe, some of the schedule stuff like at the start of the year, and maybe, moving Ascension, that might help as well. But for the rest of the year, whilst tier 2 is going on alongside tier 1, I don't think that's really gonna help viewership. But they might just be like, there's not much we can do. So that could be a problem, but I do think that will still be a problem, particularly in like EMEA and whatnot. So that's something I'm still worried about. Overall, I mean, the schedule I think is the big change, and that's where I'm like, okay, the schedule change is good. The rest we'll have to see. I still think tier 2 will have its problems, but it's a tier 2 esport. Go and find any tier 2 esport that doesn't have some problems, and you'll be searching for a very long time. And they even say here at the bottom that, they're willing to evolve. Some of this will work, some of it won't work, but they'll, continue to change as they get that information of what works and what doesn't. And I think, for me, Riot's vision is a bit different to other people's vision of what tier 2 should be and what tier 2 should look like. And I think that if your vision is different to Riot's and what tier 2 should be, then the changes that they're going to make is just not going to be for you. Right, they're not going to cater to you because you just have different outlooks on what it should be. But if you do align with somewhat of Riot's vision, then I think these changes are probably a step in the right direction. Definitely not like tier 2 is going to be fixed, but it is a step, I think, in the right direction, particularly the schedule.